Hello, everybody. I kind of don't really know where I'm supposed to start. Um, I actually had in my head this was going to be like a fishbowl conversation, and I was going to be talking to two other women at the same time. So, but I'll just start, I guess, at a year ago, let's say. And I know you usually start the story at the beginning, but the beginning of the story is kind of actually like irrelevant until the day that I sit down with one of my clients and he tells me he's just gotten an adult ADHD diagnosis because he's got a kid with it, like same old story. And I'm like, wow, I wish I could have ADHD. That would totally solve everything. And he's like, well, actually, Vivian, I'm telling you, because one of the reasons that I like working with you is you're so much like me. And I was like, oh yeah, but I'm a woman. And his wife pipes in. He's like, well, actually, do you know that this many percentage of women and blah, blah, blah. And then my like hyper focus kicks in and I go down the rabbit hole. And like, I've read every paper. I've talked to all these women. I got a hold of Patricia Quinn. I'm like, and then we're going to rewind and we're going to look at my story two ways. My first story, Vivian didn't do very well in school. She wandered the halls. She went to the bathroom a lot. She went to the bathroom so much that 3 different elementary teachers asked my parents to get me a bladder infection test. So I just had a sneaky bladder infection. Get to high school, start running the theater program, do so well there. I start a festival. I get them $10,000 worth of sponsorship because I reach out to like real estate agents who are like, yeah, we'll give you money. And like, so they're like, wow, Vivian's great. Let's give her special projects. Graduate high school with no math or science because I just didn't do the homework. Get out of school, try to have a normal job. And I'm going to tell you secretly, I shouldn't say this because I'm not going to tell you who it was, but there were employers that I had where I would sneak into the back when there were no customers, and I'd like take a nap in the back and then get back up because I was just so bored and tired. So figured out I couldn't do that. Went back to university to do theater because that's where I'd been successful. Stumbled into clowning and dropped out of university because I had a successful business, not because I wasn't getting assignments in, not because the reading was too much, not for any of those reasons, because I was successful. So I build a company by the saving grace of the fact that I accidentally hire a micromanager as my assistant. But total fluke, just because she was my cousin and I trusted her. I end up with 16 staff, travel all over the world. I do all the fun parts. I hear about all these cool stuff like, hey, there's this thing called Mardi Gras. You can go and like paint there. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Let's get on a plane. Let's make some clients there. And now we're going to paint boobs for a while. This is really fun. Literally just having the time of my life, but never like thought I'd have kids or a normal life until I meet Paul. And then Paul is like the first guy I'd actually have kids with. So I'm like, okay, well, like, let's sit down. Let's like make a plan. We're going to do this. And I give up my company because now I'm like, I can't travel and be home with kids. So what am I going to do? Well, he's doing really well. I'll quit and I'll stay home. I'm like, how hard can this be? Right. So then my whole life falls apart because I am the micromanager and I am the scheduler and I have to get the snacks on the table. And like, this is really important now. People can die if I don't get this right, and I can't. So I go to the doctor kind of in this state. Wow, it's like I'm acting for you. I go to the doctor and I'm like, man, it's just not working for me. And like, I can't stop thinking at night. And I can't, like, I keep dropping balls. I would make play dates with 3 other women and say, okay, meet you at 10. And I would always do more than me because sometimes I wouldn't show up at my own play dates. Like I'd be like, hey guys, what do you want to do? Yeah, 10 o'clock, I'll meet you at the plogram. And then I just wouldn't show. So I lost a lot of friends doing that, trying to build a community around myself. And I just said to my doctor, like I'm just like flopping all over the place. And he's like, well, what kinds of things do you worry about? I'm like, well, I'm kind of worried I'm going to leave my kids in the car. And he's like, well, that's an irrational fear. You must have postpartum depression. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I put that hat on and I wore that hat way beyond the window of what postpartum depression clinically can be. And it would go away when I was pregnant and it would come back when I wasn't pregnant. And then I get like all the way to the end of that journey. And I'm like, I got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. And I'm like, this can't be PPD. Like, what else could it be? So then let's put on the bipolar hat. Let's put on the I'm socially anxious. I have social anxiety disorder. I can't even tell you how many pills and it was always like, well, if I kind of squish myself sideways, I can kind of fit under any one of these labels, but none of it ever worked for me. Like none of it was ever the diagnosis. And I remember sitting with now a psychiatrist, my third or fourth person that I've tried to figure this stuff out with. And he says, we're having a conversation about what happens in the shower. And I'm like, I'll get in the shower and I make like 6 business plans, and then I figure out what I'm going to do. And then I don't do any of that. And then I like, and what about you? What do you do in the shower? And he's like, I look at the soap, pick up the soap, rub the soap on my body, pick up the shampoo, pour it in my hand, shampoo my hair. Then I condition it and I get out and I start my day. And I'm like, liar. I didn't like, I was just like, well, you just don't want to tell me what kinds of things you think about. So this is all pre-understanding ADHD. Going through my history now, knowing that I have ADHD and taking like the things that they say about girls. And my mom is a hoarder, so I have all my old report cards. I have all my assessments. There isn't a page that I was given through elementary or high school that doesn't at least have 3 highlighted statements that are quintessentially ADHD. You look at what I did, like I built a company because I would see crazy things like, let's go to New Orleans. I'm in Canada. Let's go to New Orleans and paint boobs. And that's a crazy thought. But I would have booked the ticket before anybody could talk any sense into me because I'm impulsive. And so that works. Like, I don't regret that I have ADHD, and I don't regret the things that I did. What I regret is that, and this is my key message, like if you want to talk about like, why is Vivian at a conference, is that I think we understand really well now to look for it at university when all the systems drop. My own daughter is going on her journey now because I'm looking at her going, she's me with a paranoid mom who doesn't let her fall down. And as soon as she's at university, she is screwed. So we're on her journey now. But I really think that there's an opportunity when everybody is looking at postpartum depression as the label to say, what else is it? Because the thing that I keep coming back to is when I talk to doctors is everybody's like, oh, it's comorbid with anxiety, and let's get your anxiety under control and then we'll worry about the ADHD. And there's a line that I think Patricia Quinn says that is, unless you manage the ADHD, you can't get the other stuff under control. And so of my support network of 12 women with postpartum depression, looking back now, there are 3 of us that I would say were misdiagnosed with postpartum depression. And that was really sad for me because I told you I'd cry. I was a really great mom for reasons that most moms can't be great moms, like huge tropical tea parties and massive adventures and all of these things that I could have done more of if I had just known, hire out the housekeeping and get a meal planner, because those aren't your strengths. Instead, I really, really tried to just be this mentally unhealthy person who had to figure it out. And so if I have any sorrow, and if I have any wish for women that are younger, is that if you happen to be like me and find a great reason to drop out of university instead of having to go through the assessment system, that postpartum depression is a great time to see an opportunity to diagnose. So that's my story, and those are my tears. And I think I'm done, Annie.
Well, Vivian, I think we all felt that, and you have lots of, I'm gonna read out some little chat marks, but if people have questions for Vivian, do not hesitate to say. You could pop them in. Are you okay?
Oh yeah, I'm fine.
I would love to be non-virtual and to be able to provide hugs.
But then I would cry harder.
But everybody's there. So everybody's thanking you for your share. It was so helpful, insightful. They're just flying by me right now. You know, so many people the stories resonate with so many people. Everybody's giving you hugs. Thank you for sharing your vulnerability.
I'd actually really love this recording. I'd like to take what I just said and put it on my website, because what I've also figured out is that I have started and sold 7 businesses. So now a great thing for me to do is business development and strategy. And what I'm seeing is a theme that pretty much all of my clients are attracted to me, probably because they also have ADHD. And I'm considering focusing on that and only dealing with ADHD as sort of a spot, because when I start working with the really linear ones who like things in spreadsheets, I'm not their person. Like, I'm just not their person. So I almost wonder if, having said this all out loud now, if that was relatively like formed into something that I could put out, I would actually be willing to share that out in a wider circle. So
excellent. Someone said, thank you for sharing. I just found out this week that I have ADHD and I'm doing all this research. This was comforting to hear that others have similar experiences. And that's what's great about these stories that we're getting from these 3 real women. I could send you guys all a bunch of resources, but to hear it straight out from them is excellent. Many people are saying so common for girls and women to be diagnosed as anxiety and depression instead of ADHD.
And I think, like, can I just say on that? I just want to say on that, yes. And I see it in my daughter. It's happening again. Even me, I was like looking at my son, like, oh, my son might have ADHD. And I even looked at my daughter and said, she's like winning an award this week. She started a club. She's doing really, really well. Like, I'm falling for it, even with her. And for me, the difference is that everything that, like, all the things that make her anxious are places where I know she's worried she'll drop a ball, or where she's worried that she's going to stand out because it takes too much time for her to do her work and she needs extra time for testing because the noise in the classroom just really bothers her. And so I never had the kind of anxiety where I'd sit up at night going like, oh my God, the world is doomed. And if I leave my house, my car might blow up. It was always, how am I going to screw up today?
Yeah.
Right. So anyhow, I'm going to mute myself now. Thank you so much.
Well, no, hold on for a second, Vivian, because I just wanted to let you know, some people are saying definitely share your story, but please keep yourself open to the entrepreneurs who don't self-identify as having ADHD, to catch those who don't know it yet.
That's a really good point, because most of them probably don't know. Thank you. Who said that? That was brilliant.
So that was from Lyndon Hilson. So thank you, Lyndon. And also, not wanting to work with people who aren't comfortable with your neurodiversity is a huge awareness. We should all be more conscious of ourselves so we know how to help others in the ways we can. So these are excellent comments. Thank you very much. And Vivian, is there a way that they can connect with you if need be?
Yes, you can. So, and like copy paste it or whatever, because everybody spells it wrong when they try, but I actually have a website up at vivian.viant.ca, or you can just search my name and I hopefully will pop up for you. And I'm actually working on a second website right now. I wrote a kids book a long time ago and I'm like, screw it. Now I'm just going to write kids books. So I actually hired a graphic designer person to help me put this story about my daughter trying to do her seatbelt up, where, for going back to the ways I was a great mom, is I made everything fantastically fun. So when they couldn't do their seatbelt up, it was like the seatbelt had a personality and it was a battle between them. So I wrote this whole story about her battling with the seatbelt, and the belt and the buckle are fighting, and click. And that will be out this year for Christmas at joyandwhimsy.ca, which is my new favorite.
So Vivian, it's been asked if you could please add all those websites in the chat.
I can do that.
And people can then access it. So luckily you're the first speaker, so it'll stay in the chat for a while. So that is excellent. Thank you very much, Vivian, for your share. And I will now move on to our next guest speaker, Rochelle Bien Barnard. Rochelle is from Alberta and is passionate about advocating for women with ADHD. So Rochelle, I will pass it on to you if you want to turn on your camera and your mic.
I should be good to go.
We're good to go.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Rochelle B. Bernard. As you know, I am a 47-year-old female with a neurodiverse brain. And I, like many of you, are experiencing my own version of ADHD. I have been with my husband for 26 years. I have 3 children, a 26-and-a-half-year-old son with untreated ADHD who struggles with addiction and anxiety. I have a 21-year-old daughter with treated ADHD and bipolar, and I have a 13-year-old son who does not have ADHD, and so I feel guilty, but I have this kind of yay me because he's a little bit easier to parent. I guess I'm probably a little wiser with him too. But anyway, I have 3 jobs and I like to live, therefore life is busy. My 3 most impairing ADHD symptoms are impulsivity, so I definitely can operate on a do now, think later, hypersexuality, and emotional dysregulation, which is empathy and kindness. And that often catches people off guard because they see those as being really positive traits in my personality, yet they're not positive entirely because I take other people's emotions on as if they were my own, and sometimes people don't invite you to take on their emotions, and so that can cause problems. The story that I want to share today touches on my early life, with the majority though of it focusing on the last several years. I always feel sort of as a caveat to say I have to read off my notes a bit because I can't remember anything. So a quote that I often think about with ADHD that resonates with me is, there is an agonizing dissonance between the self that you know and the character being performed by yourself. I was raised in a churched home. I had kind, loving, supportive parents, and they had deep religious convictions, so naturally compliance was expected. To me, this meant always be a good girl. This wasn't easy for me because it had positive and negative effects. So the negative effects were that I felt a tremendous amount of guilt because I couldn't fully comply ever, and I couldn't stay in the bounds of what was expected of me. The positive in it was because there were so many boundaries, structures, and rules in place that it kind of helped keep me in line, I guess is what I would say. I had a very typical childhood. Teachers, friends, relatives, right from early on stated that I was a whirlwind, easily distracted. I was a chatterbox, a busybody. Sometimes I know too that I wasn't invited into play with other kids because maybe I was too much. The preschool teacher actually told my mother that she'd never seen a child move from one activity to the next as fast as I did. So clearly I was overstimulated and overwhelmed, to say the least. As an adolescent and teenager, risky behaviors, I was extremely impulsive. That's where my do now, think later comes in. My marks were super inconsistent in school. I'd hand a paper in and I'd get a 95 on it. And then the next week to the same teacher, I'd hand a paper in and I'd get 40%. Only one teacher in my entire educational experience ever expressed to me or asked me why I was so inconsistent, and said that I should be curious about it and that I should do something about it. And of course, for me, I didn't even think about myself as being smart or intelligent until I was in my 40s, because it seemed that the behavioral things were more the focus of what people cared about. That I was in, like, my report cards, everything was always, she talks too much, she's distracted, she zones out. I was sexually active at a young age. I had a boyfriend all through high school, which limited my promiscuity. It was an unhealthy relationship that I was in. And definitely in some ways, I guess I just felt like that's what I deserved because I didn't really understand myself. I was always on the edge. I had lots of friends. I was super likable. I was fun. I was kind, caring, and friendly. I had a few nicknames. One was Spinny, and I don't think that that was obviously a compliment to me. In these years, I heard comments like Earth calling Rochelle and hey, Space Cadet. And I know it wasn't meant to be hurtful. It was though, and always gave me a message of failure again. In early adulthood, I had an unwanted pregnancy at 20 and I wasn't ready to be a mom. Fortunately, I had amazing support from my parents and from my father's parents. And so that made all the difference in the world. At 22, I met my husband, and within a year we were married. And it was hard being a mom at 20 though, when you're still trying to grow up yourself. I would say it was in here that the quest for perfection to cover up my supposed inadequacies really began. So I lived my entire life feeling frustrated that I wasn't good enough, that I couldn't just get there. I felt like I was a bad person. If I pursued perfection though in every way, it would hide what I call the bees inside my head. I describe my ADHD as feeling like there's bees inside my head that, you know, because a bee doesn't really ever stay anywhere for very long. So it, you know, they buzz around and they hover and then they zip over here. And so I feel like that's my brain. My life moved forward, raising 3 kids, was not, I didn't really do well in pregnancy. I gained a lot of weight, had definitely hormonal challenges, and had very traumatic deliveries for all 3 of them. At 36 years old, when I was struggling to keep it all together, I had a husband that worked away from home. I did have everyone's built-in schedules, school, sports, jobs, church, friends, my marriage, and they all helped my ADHD because I strive. I was always trying to meet expectation. So my life was good, but it was really exhausting. I began to wake up in the middle of the night. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I was hyperventilating, and this was something that I'd never experienced in my life. So I went to a doctor, and the doctor, not unlike Vivian, at first said, well, you know, maybe you have you have postpartum depression. Even though my daughter was 10 years old, he said maybe it was missed, and so that I was depressed. And so he put me on a medication for depression, which helped mildly, but it wasn't really the answer. And I kept telling him, this isn't working and I'm not depressed. This isn't what's wrong with me. So fortunately, later in that year, my daughter was referred to a mood disorder clinic. And at this clinic, you go with your whole family and they do this incredibly invasive interview of your family dynamics and how everybody is with each other. And it involved all 5 of us. And when they were putting together, after they've spent several hours with you, they put together this synopsis of your what they're going to do to help you, and you can either take it or leave it. And this psychiatrist, she pointed at me across the room and she said, you are a mother who is being treated for having mild depression. She said, you are parenting a 16-year-old son with ADHD. You're parenting a daughter with an anxiety disorder and undiagnosed ADHD, which is why she was experiencing the anxiety and learning disabilities. And she said, and you have a baby. She said, you do not have depression. She said, you have untreated ADHD. So from there, I was given medication, which was extremely helpful. No real education though, or support that was specific for my ADHD. I do remember though, the first time that I took the meds for ADHD, I went out for coffee with my husband. I started on a Saturday, and I vividly remember looking up at him across the room and saying, wow, so this is what it's like to have clarity of thought. I don't think I'd ever experienced it in my entire life, and I was 36 years old. The next 9 years were fairly steady and on track. My husband and I were definitely dealing with some great diversity, and my husband has his own challenges with depression. And I never really noticed what was going on with me because I worked full time, kept the house, volunteered, and always made time for friends and family because I struggle with time blindness. And so I just fit everything in, and it seemed to be, you know, it was fine. But my ability to get through and commit to dealing with really challenging things is quite extraordinary, and I'm grateful for that. My hyperfocus and my constant need for stimulation made it work well for me, and I'm resilient in self-reflection, so I'm able to take action, and I also feel fortunate for that. So we persevered. Life went on, because this is just what you do, and just did it again to mask what was actually happening inside of me. At 44 years old, I was really off again. I mean, really off. And this is where my story actually becomes quite interesting. And it was life-altering for me in terms of my ADHD journey. So I went back to the doctor, and in short, he concluded, based on the symptoms I presented, my heart was racing, I was so fatigued at night, and I was experiencing shortness of breath. The only conclusion was that my ADHD meds were no longer effective. So here my beehive basically went into overdrive, because it was months and months of trying different meds. And anyone knows who has done med trials for ADHD, that every time I started a new one, because nothing was working, I would go back to ground zero. And so this was affecting my job to a point where I had to go and have a conversation with my boss because I wasn't performing at work. When I was driving, I never got into an accident, but I'm really not sure how. It affected my relationships with other people, and I kind of was feeling out of control. So my doctor decided to send me to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist determined that I had a sleep disorder and that I was struggling with depression yet again. And again, once, because I'd had my son 2 years prior, that I had my son and that it was undiagnosed, that these were probably the issues. And I repeatedly said to him, you know, I'm not depressed. I don't have the type of sleep issues that you are referring to me that I have. Anyway, on one visit, he took my heart rate, and he decided that I should start taking something to slow my heart rate down. Well, so what this did was put one foot on the gas with the one medication and one foot on the brakes. And so that was an uncomfortable time for me and an exhausting time for me in my life. He told me on a visit about a new drug for adults with ADHD and convinced me that I should try it. And so I said, well, nothing else has worked. And so, sure, I'll give it a try. So I was diagnosed at the same time with a heart condition by my cardiologist that he said I was born with, which was causing the symptoms I had just mentioned that he said sometimes were exacerbated in midlife with hormones. So in November of 2018, I started on a methylphenidate drug. I thought it was fine. I know it's a slow process to get meds to the right dosage. I knew from the past that this is kind of the way it works. And even at the max dosage, I was still not having any success on the medication. So in less than 1 month after being on these meds, I started work on a massive tattoo at 44. Nothing wrong with getting a tattoo at 44, but I had never really thought about doing this before. I had a small tattoo that was like this, that became this massive, beautiful art piece. It seemed in 2.5 months later, I woke up one morning and I announced to my husband that I was making an appointment with a plastic surgeon to get a breast augmentation. Something, again, I thought about 10 years ago, but never really pursued anything with it. I was going on trips, I was booking things, I wasn't discussing anything with my family, and I was incredibly impulsive and spontaneous. My flirting was out of control. I was engaging in inappropriate conversations with the opposite sex and engaging in inappropriate relationships. I felt completely out of control. By June, I did have two friends ask me if I was okay, expressing concern about not the decisions that I had made, but the rapid rate in which I was making these decisions. And I told them I was fine. I didn't really feel any guilt around what I was doing. And so in reflection, I guess, I know I kept thinking, I'm going to snap out of this and be me again, but whoever that even was, I wasn't sure. I was behaving someone like really an adolescent teenager. I kept saying to my husband, what's wrong with me? He is very understanding and loves me deeply. We're both committed to our love and to our family and our relationship. In the meantime, the doctor's still not listening to me when I'm saying that something isn't right. In late August, so this is now 9 months in, I went to my husband sobbing. And I said to him, there's something seriously wrong with me. I don't even want to do the things I'm doing, but I said, I just feel like I can't even stop. My marriage was at serious risk of ending, and I guess I felt pretty desperate. I asked myself repeatedly, I went over everything in my head about what was different in my life. And then suddenly, thankfully, the light went on. And the only thing that had changed in my life in the past 9 months was my ADHD meds. So thankfully, in September, I met Dr. Sarah Binder through a mutual friend of mine and a colleague of hers to do an interview for the CADDAC conference in October of 2019. To be a female face with ADHD who was thriving despite experiencing great adversity in life. I was mastered at masking and meeting expectation. I looked like I had everything together all the time. I also thought, well, I'm in midlife and my kids were stable and far less dependent. I did have more time than ever on my hands to think about myself. And maybe what I was going through was actually reasonable because I was finally thinking about me. At the end of our 90-minute conversation to prepare for this interview, she paused and she asked me if there was anything else that I wanted to tell her that was important. And so I sat there and I thought, well, I could tell her anyway, or I could just say nothing. So I decided to tell her about what I had been experiencing over the last 9 months. It was extremely awkward and uncomfortable for me because, you know, she sees me, my friend sees me as who sent me to do this, sees me as this woman who has ADHD but has her life together. So I felt ashamed yet again, and I just knew though that I needed help. So I'm grateful for the intervention. And it was determined that I was essentially unmedicated for the past 9 months, as I'm a zero responder to methylphenidate drugs, something that happens for some people. We can only take one type or the other, and that I'm only a responder to amphetamines. So I remember when I got in the car and I had the prescription from her in my hand, I felt like I was a kid in a candy store, because I was so excited, because I knew that I would respond and feel like a new version of myself to some degree. And I'd also learned a ton about who I really was during this period of time. So I started an active treatment with her and started seeing a sex therapist who specializes in women with ADHD. I had an understanding of the connection of addiction and ADHD because of my son. However, I didn't really understand how much ADHD can affect our tendencies to be addicted. So am I an addict? No. But do I fully understand how easily one moves there? Absolutely. And I always remind myself that addiction does not discriminate. I've spent the past 2 years fine-tuning my ADHD to great lengths. The greatest gift I've given myself is accepting my own version of ADHD. I had some solid tools already, or I wouldn't be where I am. And so I am proud of myself for that. How do I do it? I guess, well, acceptance. By accepting and truly understanding that we never just arrive and are there, and that ADHD is a journey is a major factor. Awareness, I'm self-aware, so I'm clear on how my ADHD impacts me and everyone else around me. If I'm not managing it, it's managing me and wreaks its havoc. Treatment and medication. I use a baseline. I know my cycle very well, and I modify what I take based on what I have going on, sometimes on a daily, and where my cycle is at, because zero estrogen and ADHD for me is a lethal combination. I've learned perimenopause and all of that I'm also going through. There's definitely a correlation between our hormones as females and ADHD. I focus on my core values, what means the most to me. My family, career, support, spirituality, and health are to name a few. And I know that when I'm focused on my core values, that there isn't time for impulsivity, hypersexuality, or emotional dysregulation to be in charge of me. I wear a talisman every single day. It reminds me that ADHD is present, and it's my choice to rule it or alternatively let it rule me. And I'm disciplined. The one thing I absolutely know is that success with ADHD has nothing to do with motivation and everything to do with discipline. When I stopped waiting for motivation to kick in and replaced it with discipline, my whole life really did change. I had connected my actions throughout my life and my choices to not being the good Christian girl, wife, mother, friend, employee that I should be. And I was ruled by guilt. Understanding and accepting that there was an explanation for why I am the way I am. And I always say ADHD is an explanation, but never an excuse, has been really freeing. And of course, with support and education, I've been able to let go of what no longer serves me in my life and what really never did. And it is absolutely freeing. I am proud actually to be a 47-year-old female with ADHD. I don't know any other way. There is a true beauty in having ADHD, and I live this now. I don't feel any shame in it whatsoever. It's just a part of who I am. I now facilitate a group for women in Calgary with ADHD, mentoring and educating them through living experience and facts, that it's entirely possible to be at peace with your ADHD self. I also learned from each of them to see ADHD from another perspective. And I feel motivated by the people that I guess where I do feel motivation is I feel motivated by the people that reach out to me to keep doing what I'm doing. And then I use my discipline to keep using my voice because I'm not afraid to. I guess a few things that I think about in finishing today is to advocate for yourself or your child, because no one will do it for you, and be relentless about it. Accept your own version of ADHD. Take action, forget about motivation, use discipline, have support. It's absolutely crucial. The times in my life when I've been experiencing great adversity is when I have done the best, is when I've had support. And I think it's important to be kind to yourself without making excuses. And also, last but not least for me, is it's a word I live by in my life now, is awareness. Always be aware of the impact that your ADHD has on you and how it affects those around you. And for me, these are the keys to my freedom. Thank you.
I'm sure if everybody, if you could hear them, I'm sure they're clapping or crying or cheering for you. There's a lot of wonderful messages for you. Your resilience is incredible.
Thank you.
There are some questions, and the questions are, one is, what is the correlation between estrogen and ADHD? The person says she's had breast cancer and takes tamoxifen. So she's curious to know more about that. Is that something you could speak to?
I can't speak to it on
Okay.
other, I mean, I can say that only for my own personal experience, that when my estrogen is at 0, I'm almost non-functioning and feel like I'm going crazy. And so then for me, I bump up my ADHD meds to sort of mitigate that until my cycle starts again. And then honestly, the day I start my period again, I feel like a whole different person. It's so, I don't know scientifically what the, connection is. I only know from tracking myself and through working with my doctor that there's a connection.
Excellent. So you mentioned Sarah Binder, Dr. Sarah Binder earlier. We do have a webinar that she did for us in the spring, and it's actually called Females, Hormones, and ADHD. If ever someone's interested, you could check it out on our website. Somebody says, I never felt smart until the past year. I'm almost finished my MA. It will be my 3rd university degree, but congratulations to you. I love the analogy. My brain has too many tabs open, but the bees one is better. So that's and because you could see that, right? You could see those bees. Yeah.
When you watch a beehive and how they work, I feel like that is what my brain does constantly.
Excellent. For that description, putting those words to someone else who might not know how to explain what they're feeling. Someone says, my life was good, but very exhausting.
So what does that mean is what they're wondering?
Such an apt summary. So it's just such a good way to describe it is what they're saying.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
And you're so brave and amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this. And Vivian actually wrote down, God bless the supportive men married to women like us.
Yeah, I definitely will say that my husband and I, in my marriage, I sort of treat like there's myself, there's my husband, and there's my ADHD. And so there's often times of figuring out, is this about me? Is this about him? Or is this my ADHD? And I know I've read a book by Dr. Gina Para that is called, I think, Is It Me? Is It You? Is It ADHD? And I know she's speaking, I think, later today. But anyway, it's a fantastic book for helping understand the role that ADHD plays in your relationship.
Excellent. But someone else says, and God bless the incredible women who didn't settle for men who weren't supportive of them.
100%.
And that is so true.
Absolutely.
So you have miles and miles of questions or comments. Somebody says we really need a perimenopause, an HRT revolution for women in Canada, like is happening in Australia and the UK, and understanding all that. Can you please share your link for your group that you facilitate?
Yes, I will.
And I think that's one thing too. So for myself as a resource navigator, anybody who has great resources from the areas, different provinces you're in, if you guys want to share those throughout the day, that would be wonderful throughout the weekend. So Vivian, I think you've shared yours, and now Rochelle, if you can make sure you share your information. And if anybody has some great doctors too and stuff that would be wonderful. We have Dr. Sarah Binder on our list of resources, so but thank you.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, everybody's saying powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing, but go ahead.
I was just going to say that I get a lot of comments about, being brave to share what I share, because clearly it's extremely vulnerable, that it touches on things that people don't want to talk about, specifically my hypersexuality. And I don't view myself as being brave per se, but what I do think is that we're just at a point, and we have been for a long time, but now we have resources to speak up and use our voices as women and to talk about our experiences with ADHD. And I feel like it's so important to me to be a part of the change in removing stigma, and it's just important that we use our voices if we're willing.
And a lot of people are using their voice, or their writing skills in these chats, and they're incredible.
That's awesome.
And I hope you'll have a chance, Rochelle, to go through that and to see what everybody's written for you and shared with you.
I will. Thank you.
We truly appreciate your vulnerability and being able to talk honestly about what you've gone through. So thank you very much, Rochelle. Are there more questions? Are there any questions for Rochelle, or just these are so someone says, I'm the mother of an 18-year-old girl with ADHD and wonder if the other end of the hormone spectrum is making life even harder for her now. Do you recommend support groups for this age?
I definitely recommend support and help at any age, because something that we had spoke about earlier even was, if the resources were available to me at a younger age, I think my life, not that I don't dwell on the past, but if you have these resources available to you so that you don't feel so alone, because I'm sure that your daughter feels like she maybe is somewhat on an island of her own. And so when you go into these groups and there's support with people that it's so relatable, even though everyone's ADHD looks different, it really feels good. It's a positive experience.
And Rochelle, thank you so much. And that's going to be a really good segue onto our next guest speaker. So Rochelle, thank you.
Thank you.
And so our next guest speaker is Lauren Pearson. And Lauren is 17 years old. She's a student with ADHD from Ontario, and she is a young advocate for neurodiverse individuals like herself. So Lauren, if you want to turn on your video.
I have it on.
Okay, there we go. So there's Lauren. So I'm just going to come back to sharing her screen. So there we go.
Okay, 1 second. Okay. Hi, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are located. So I'm going to share my personal story / journey with ADHD and how it was getting diagnosed as a teenager and growing up and academics and all of that. But before I dive into my personal story.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lauren.
But before I dive into my personal story, I just wanted to share some terms which I will occasionally maybe reference or bring up in case you guys maybe aren't familiar with them. So they include neurodiverse, neurotypical, and neuroatypical. So neurodiverse is a term that refers to the difference among the human brain regarding executive functioning, sociability, learning, attention, regulation, and other psychological functions. This could include individuals that may have neurodevelopmental conditions such as ADHD, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, and more. And then a neurotypical person, which is a person that essentially means to have a typical neurological makeup in their neurophysiology, with no pre-existing neurodisorders. And it can include, it does not mean they don't have any hierarchical, pretentious overview, but more so just their brain functions more normally physiologically. And then a neuroatypical person, someone like myself, is an individual with a neurological difference or neurodevelopmental disorder condition such as ADHD. So now let's get into about me. I'd like to let you all on a little story I call My Life This Far. I'm currently a senior in high school, and I haven't thought much about myself being an advocate as I've always been this way, but I guess that's the most imperative thing when participating in advocacy and getting the word out within your community. See, often when we're receiving feedback or interest to or in from a different field, we do lots of research, we read, we get information, but I feel we often forget that the most crucial information is getting it straight from the source, the primary source, for example. In this case, it would be participating and creating outreach opportunities with real individuals with ADHD, which is exactly what I had the chance to do through this presentation and at this conference. So, I mean, thank you all for being here and attending, because that's already helping get rid of the stigma. To be honest, I was thinking and debating whether I should create a fancy speech, but after various hours of procrastination, thank you, ADHD, I found out that it's not so much as an incoherence, but more as an alternative way, such as taking the back way when you're driving. We aren't inadequate, we're just requiring different approaches to the task at hand. So for me, getting diagnosed, my story was not short of being dysfunctional or shy from challenging. Prior to my diagnosis, I struggled a lot with the internal battles psychologically dealing with ADHD and fellow comorbidity conditions, such as anxiety and depression. And it wasn't until my sophomore year in high school, around 2019, the fall of 2019, first semester, when things started to really go downhill. I wasn't performing how I used to in my academics prior to when I got assessed for ADHD. I had a lot of inattentive symptoms. I found it hard to concentrate. Easy or moderately mundane tasks such as completing homework or even taking quizzes or tests took accentuating periods of time. In comparison, unlike my peers, even when I was younger in middle school, grade 7, I'd be staying up late at night studying for quizzes. And it wasn't in the sense of perfectionism, but it was more in the sense of my brain could only manifest and produce task management at that speed. I also had distractibility. I was always kind of into my thoughts, very intuitive. And I think that's kind of why I got I wasn't misdiagnosed, but more so I kind of just got overlooked. I was a quiet and a shy kid, but I was really struggling deeply inside with my psychological symptoms. I felt pretty helpless and stuck as I had no answers to why I felt this way before I got diagnosed. But after receiving my diagnosis, I felt like my behaviors and my brain and all the ideas surrounding it finally made sense, and I felt somewhat normal. I felt like I didn't have a disadvantage compared to my peers, and my mind was much clearer. And then for treatment, I did multiple trial and errors on different medications, as some of the other speakers were talking about. I currently take Concerta 54 milligrams, which is a stimulant, in the morning, and it really helps me ease my symptoms, especially during the school day. But like I've learned throughout this experience, that I must be on top of my medication management. As the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility. The process of trial and error was much evident during the period, like I said earlier, in which it took to find the correct medication. However, I've had much relief from my ADHD symptoms. Again, like I was talking about earlier, I was always a shy kid. I kept to myself. So my struggles they were all overlooked. No one thought I was struggling. But how can you determine someone's internal psychological battles from just looking at their outside presentation or comparing their challenges or what they seem to present on a scale of like everyone else or different? And when we think in this black and white mindset, we're kind of associating it with the narrative that different is bad. But when did different become bad? Our differences make the world go round. I mean, at least from my perspective, I think the world would be a lot worse if we all conformed to societal stereotypes and pretended to just fit into the box that our fellow members of community equate to. I think, in fact, we are all different from each other, whether it be from our neurological differences, chemical imbalances with dopamine, which is common for individuals with ADHD, or if it's having blue eyes versus green eyes. We all are all different in some way or not. And that really is so crucial to helping spread awareness and really figuring out how we can help individuals that may be having difficulties being neurodiverse or non-neurodiverse, whatever equates to your personal brain. And then as an adolescent, since I am currently in high school in my grade 12 year, it was also a very important thing for me to have an IEP due to my ADHD and my lack of attention span. So some of my accommodations include of extra time on assessments and tests. But I think something that's really important, and even being a young advocate like myself, is it's really about self-advocacy, because really no one can know exactly how you're feeling or your struggles if you don't voice them or speak out about them. So that is something that I've been really trying to do and working on, but I think I've come very far with, with being on Concerta and just learning different techniques on how to regulate my time management. And yeah, it's up to me to tell my teachers that I required the accommodations that I need. But also, again, this is just speaking on behalf of my experience. Everyone's IEP is to each their own. And I think some of the problems of being a teen with ADHD, especially in high school, because everyone is teenagers and like you hormonal and maybe not the nicest. So some people can think it's like an extra bonus. And like they're like, well, if you do well on tests, why are you getting extra time? But it's not like being neuroatypical. It's not the same as being neurotypical. So for some people like myself, it's really a necessity and a requirement, not necessarily a special accommodation, but a necessity needed. Throughout my adolescence and getting diagnosed at around 15, I feel like I've gained really valuable insight that maybe my neurotypical friends haven't had to deal with. And not to discredit anyone who is neurotypical, but in my experience, I definitely had to, like I said earlier, learn how to kind of cater to my different needs and fix the puzzle piece to fit in the puzzle that fits for my brain. I've learned so much about the importance of psychological health through my battles with executive functioning to experiencing extreme amounts of social fatigue. And I think one thing that is important for any adolescent is to build your tribe. I mean, it takes a village to raise a child, right? And that's one of the important things, especially if you are struggling in any way, not necessarily with ADHD. It's really important to reach out and get involved And even through endeavors like this, it's been a really great opportunity to share my story and listen to others to help keep continually spreading awareness. I think some in the area of spreading awareness, some mundane things or easy tasks for other people can be really challenging for myself, especially when it comes to executive functioning issues, and more in that. Something else that I have to do a bit differently from my peers is really figure out, again, continually how it fits for my brain, but how I can better equate my study techniques or like planners to fit how it works for me. The common planner doesn't work for me, so I always feel the constant angst when you continually cannot fit your overloading tasks in the pretty package squares with the stickers and all the cute little things and the planners they sell nowadays. So for that solution, I use a bullet journal, and it's worked really well for me. And I actually learned about the bullet journal online through another individual with ADHD. The creator of the bullet journal actually created it, like the system, to help with his ADHD struggles. And I'm sure there's lots of resources online about it. In the future, I really hope to continue being an advocate for individuals like myself with ADHD, and I hope to attend university in the fall of 2022. I would like to study neuroscience and maybe computer science, and I really aspire to become a physician and help individuals like myself with diverse conditions. And I think to wrap it up, I'd like to end on a quote that would be, "You're never too young or too old to make a difference or start." And I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Lauren. You as well have gotten so much, so many comments. People are really engaged and happy that you have shared your story. Let's see. Let me go back up. Sorry. They're just coming in. They're just flowing and flowing. So someone says, you're so insightful for your age. So you're very accurate. Smash that patriarchy, girl. That's such a good point about the difference we have create. The differences we have create different areas of specialty. So thank you for sharing that point. It is inspiring how self-aware you are at your young age. Is anyone, accommodations don't give an unfair advantage, someone mentioned. They level the playing field, and that's absolutely.
Yeah, that's so important. That's exactly, I definitely agree with that. And I feel like some other people maybe that aren't familiar with kids or teachers that aren't familiar with kids that need accommodations, they're not aware of that. And I think that message is really important to keep spreading.
And then someone says, I'm so thankful that my 13-year-old daughter will be able to access your story here. So thank you very much, Lauren, for sharing that. We've had some wonderful set of amazing women. Thank you all for your vulnerability. You've all spoken about medication treatment. I'm curious if any of you, and that I guess is to the 3 speakers we've had so far, have engaged in non-pharmacological therapy, and if so, what was it and wasn't useful? What was and wasn't useful? So if anybody wants to chime in there.
I mean, I think for me, I've always kind of been a little apprehensive talking about, feelings and trying to equate what's going on in my brain and then comparing it with someone that may be neurotypical. Because in my experiences with like talk therapy and other non pharmaceutical treatments, So I always struggled with that, and I just couldn't find the right therapist necessarily, or the person to match. So that necessarily didn't work out that well for me in that case. So the only way I found such really relief truly was with the medications. But again, that's my personal experience. I'm only speaking on behalf of my experience. And I know for everyone it can be different. And yes, definitely, like what works for one person might not work for the other.
Exactly. Vivian or Rochelle, do you have something to add into that one?
Sorry, I was unmuting. I have personally not tried anything outside of pharmaceutical meds, because for me, it seems to work. I've certainly looked into it, discussed it. And so I can't really, I just think that, again, it's whatever, different things work for different people. It's just important to know that when you do anything, whether it's organic or non-organic, to be honest about whether it's working or not, because just because we want something to work a certain way doesn't mean that that's the solution for us.
I actually would love to weigh in here because I'm like Miss Naturopath and I live on Vancouver Island, and everybody knows about, oh, if you just like take these 3 herbs together and by the way, everybody knows something about what you should be doing, and nobody actually knows a thing about what you should be doing. And they could work. Yeah, I can get up every morning and I can run for 25 minutes, and then I can take these herbs, and then at noon, if I remember to meditate, and then, by the way, I have to sit down at 2 o'clock and refocus my brain. I can't. I don't have time. The medication is one thing I have to remember to do every day. And it just gives me back hours and hours of my time. And so, yes, I can do those things. And the stigma that I carry with me about how I should be able to manage things naturally is there for sure. And do I want to be able to run and do those things? Yes, but not in this like, I have to keep my sanity. It's like the extra perk, that's the bonus. And the underlying medication means that I actually get to enjoy all of those other things when I'm doing them, rather than being like, oh, fuck, I forgot to sign my thing and do my meditation at 11 o'clock. And now my whole day is screwed. Because for me, and I like, this is going back to what Rochelle says, which I think is really, really important, is everybody's is different. Is that for me, if I have a routine that's working, and something as silly as like, I have a desk routine and somebody put a box of shit on my desk, and that meant for 2 weeks, I didn't sit down at my desk, which meant our whole family life fell apart. I could have just moved the box. So routines are really important. And so if you're looking at the natural stuff, consider for yourself how many routines you can manage to manage. That would be, I'm going to shut up now.
Exactly. No, that's like exactly what I would say. I think that's really important, because again, everything's different for everyone, but the whole thing about the routine, like even with the medications, it's one thing to do. And even then sometimes I'll forget, or, so.
Yeah. And sometimes I'll forget, and it won't be until my husband remote works, always has. And it's been so like amazingly enlightening for him to know like some of the stuff I'm doing isn't just to irritate him. Like it's just been so good for our personal life, to add ADHD into our marriage and be like, oh, guess who's here right now? But he will come home at 11:30, like walk up the stairs is coming home, and he can tell if I'm medicated or not at lunch. He can literally be like, so did you forget to do something today? And almost 100% of the time I'm angry at him for pointing out that, yes, I did, damn it. So yeah, if it could be a patch, like I think the most ironic thing about the ADHD medication is like, same with birth control, never worked for me because I got to remember to take a pill every day. Like who's going to do that? So if you are out there and you're looking for a great project, create an ADHD medication patch. I'll be your first customer.
Oh yeah, that's so smart. Yeah, me too. I second on that.
I think it's important, and I've seen it in a couple of comments in the chat on the side too, that it is really true though, medication is only one piece, a treatment. And so when I say medication, I mean treatment more in general, whether you're using natural, whatever it is that you're doing, it's only one piece of the ADHD journey.
I don't know about everybody else, all the participants, but I'm really enjoying the fact that I'm hearing these three women from different areas of the country, different age groups, different lives, and it all comes back to the same. You guys are living the same kind of stories and the same, you guys can exchange together, and that's what this is all about, being able to connect. Making sure that everybody's stories are heard and shared. And there are so many more comments in the chat. And I truly appreciate everybody's comments and the fact that our three participants are willing to open up. A lot of people are commenting on the bullet journaling.
Yeah.
And somebody asked, what are the hardest tasks for you, Lauren?
I mean, it's like equated with executive functioning stuff. So, I mean, even like making to-do lists like that's challenging because I'll be starting on one project and then I'll be like, but and I jump to another project and then I'll start 5 projects and I'll keep working on them and switching, but I never finish the first thing, or I never end up getting one fully finished. So that's definitely like a struggle. And I think like, I mean, I don't know if this necessarily equates to being a task or more so just like kind of a blanket term for a bunch of different things, but definitely like social exhaustion, even though it's not really a task, but like, I feel like I have to really plan out, okay, if I'm going to see this friend tonight, or if I'm going to do this, and then the next day I maybe won't see anyone just because yeah, the social exhaustion can be really real.
Yeah, you don't even know that it's a thing until it's a thing.
Until it's a thing. Yeah. And we tend to over busy ourselves, right? Time blindness. And
Exactly. Yeah.
I can do this and I can
Proving
do
that I
that.
can do these things. I had a really a neat experience that I now I'm like, that was a sign. Was if you guys remember the If You Give a Mouse a Cookie book,
Yep.
and then it came out with If You Give a Mama Muffin was like the follow-up thing. And I remember reading that book at like a children's story thing, and I was like, oh, that's everybody, like I relate to that mouse. And the moms are like, not me so much. I mean, a little bit, but like,
Right.
and like little like signs like that of the things that I related to all along the way. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, going back to the bullet journaling, because like I started 7 bullet journals, and I've just paid $400 to take a course to organize myself, which I now think I have to get my money back because it's for neurotypical brains. But I'm so desperate to feel organized and feel that. So I'm still using a system I was taught in grade 11 by a teacher that I now would say probably had ADHD, which is just a spiral notebook that I brain dump on. And then I just have it. And as I do things, wherever they are on the list, I cross them off. I turn the page when it gets too messy. I start at the beginning. I put everything that's still uncrossed off on the next page at the top. I add to it in my brain dump. And I do that, and it gets messy. And if something stays at the top 3 pages, that's how I know it's not important enough. And I forgive it and I move on. And I would love to have a better system than that, but it's working. So
yeah, no, that's really good. Well, even for the bullet journal, my approach that I use isn't like the typical bullet journal, you know, on Pinterest when you see all the fancy pages with the fancy things, or I don't know, maybe that's just more like a teen thing. I don't know. But my bullet journal is very straightforward, like very straightforward. I even have it here. It's just like a small book. Oh, wait. There's a legend where you just write like, wait, that's not gonna work. I guess I can like send a photo. I don't know.
It's okay. It's okay, Lauren. Is there a name on your journal? Is there an editor or something like that that you could add in the chat box?
Yeah, here.
And while you do that, I'm just gonna share your last slide just to show, because Lauren had prepared just her front cover.
Someone said, yeah, no, I didn't mean it's just, I didn't mean
it's okay.
I didn't mean to like say it's just a teen thing. No, I meant like, I don't know, like the Pinterest, I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, this is Lauren's email address that she wanted to share, if people wanted to write to her, you're more than welcome to do that. And I truly appreciate, and I have to say, Lauren jumped on this about 2 days ago, was informed that we were going to be needing a third person, and Lauren did so. So I truly appreciate you jumping on. You did a wonderful job. And for anybody, whether you have ADHD or you don't have ADHD, the fact that you were able to get yourself organized and on at this time, wonderful. You did a great presentation. And I know that many parents out there are very appreciative. Shireen, I see your hand up.
Oh yeah, someone just exactly said what, yeah, the intricate like study blogs and Pinterest aesthetic for the bullet journals. Exactly, that's exactly what I was getting at. Yeah, those can be super intimidating, but mine is nothing like that. I just brain dump, and then I just have a legend that is based on the one that Ryder Carroll, the creator of the bullet journal, used. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube, and I just brain dump like that. So yeah.
Excellent. So I saw someone had their hand up, and as Andre said, if you could just write your message in the chat, I could read it if it's a question for our guest speakers. If not, we're coming to the end of this presentation in order for everybody to have a little 15-minute break so that we can get ready for our next presentation. Like I mentioned at the beginning, some of you weren't on yet, you will have to disconnect and reconnect. For every session, you get the choice of the 2 sessions. So for the next 2 sessions, I will be moderating one, and then Andre will be moderating the other one. And Andre has just put in the link if you want to go back onto that link. And he's also shared that great short film, Shiny Objects, that you have the next 2 days, I think, to be able to view. The password is Shiny Objects 2021 for the people who were asking the question earlier. So having said all that, once again, thank you very much, Vivian,
Annie,
Michelle, and Lauren.
Can I just say one more thing? I just saw something. First of all, you're saving the chat, is that right?
Yes, the chats will be saved.
Something just went past me on the chat. That was about a mom who said, like, really sad that the school system didn't catch it. And if I've learned one thing about this journey, and now doing it for my daughter, I'm a diagnosed woman with ADHD, is that the school system has so many kids and they're just getting stuff thrown at them all the time. I had to come to accept that I am the primary educator and advocate for myself and my family, and that they are only going to respond to the top 5 emails, and that the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that I am the leader of this charge. My doctor is not going to, like, I used to have this idea that like the man or the woman with the stethoscope had a file on me and went every night and reviewed, oh, I better get a hold of Vivian. No, that's not going to happen. They're going to drop my ball, and that's okay because they have lots of balls. And so if you are seeing, if you're in this room and you're like, I wonder why the school system's not catching it or my doctor's not catching it, I invite you to catch it and kindly hand it to them over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think I said it at the end of my chat, be relentless in your advocacy for yourself and your children, because as Vivian said, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
And you can kindly squeak. You can say,
hi,
because they're your teammates, but you're the head of the team. And that was a massive revelation for me.
Just so that everybody knows, on November 9th, CADDAC is offering advocating for your child with ADHD in Canadian school systems. So you could join us, and I believe it's Heidi Bernhardt who is, yeah, it's Heidi Bernhardt that is doing this, and it's on November 9th, and it's going on for 2 weeks. So it's a 2-week program on starting November 9th, and you could just access it through our website. So please, everybody who needs help exactly to be able to be that powerful person, join Heidi on that course. So once again, I want to thank all of you. And it's greatly appreciated. And you could see it in all the chats and all the comments that we've received. And Vivian and Rochelle and Lauren, if I'll leave it open for a few minutes so that you could look through if you want to. And then at 1:45, please make sure that everybody is on their next link. And I'm wishing everybody a wonderful 2 days of conference. And thank you, you three, for leading us into a great beginning.
Thank you.
Really, thank you for leaving the chat open, because it's like on one hand, it's like a great butterfly, and and I also have the fear of missing something or missing something that somebody said. And what I'm concerned about is that there are some direct messages that I really like. I'm so scared I'm going to lose. So if I lose you, reach out, because
just a heads up that the direct, just a heads up, the direct messages won't save if you don't save them for yourself.
How do I save them for myself?
So let's see here. I don't know that the options here, but sometimes there's
on the chat,
a button.
and then you save chat right beside when you enter
at the bottom.
Yeah, at the bottom, you got the smiley face and the 3 dots.
Yeah.
You say it'll say, well, it says merge meeting.
Yeah. So normally I've saved chats before from that spot, but all I can see is
so that'll have to be from Annie. Because I think it's controlled chat.
Is it possible for people who have put in the chat that they would like to, for like anyone who wants to reach out to them, is it possible to share that from the chats later? Because it's hard, just kind of in fear of missing some.
Yeah.
Well, what we can do is put the contact information for you guys, and then we can share that in the.
Okay, sounds good.
Is it merged? Who can see your messages recording on? Andre, is it merged to meeting window?
Oh, I mean, we got to do that first.
Normally,
I think it's going to automatically save on your end if you're the host.
Yeah, it usually does. I know that when we have it in our webinars, they're saved on the side.
Yeah, 100%. You don't need to worry about it. It's going to save all the chat.
Can you not copy and paste it in your notepad?
Normally it's easy to save, but this, I think there is something that blocked the
Agree.
We have a setting. It's set. The setting is it's a controlled chat, so the setting is not accessible to everyone, just for privacy.
Yeah, it's just for the co-host, unfortunately, probably.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So
we'll get it to can get it to Rochelle, Lorna, and Vivian for sure. And then
you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to put, because here's the thing, like if people understand that.
We can send it out to the membership.
It's like you can find me just
yeah.
like, just please don't take offense. I miss you. But there's